for is difficult. It will require hard choices by companies. It will require unions and workers who've already made extraordinarily painful concessions to do more.
Labor news begins here at home. President Barack Obama has declared war against auto workers. At a White House press conference Monday morning, President Barack Obama outlined his administration's plans to drastically downsize the U.S. auto industry and impose more brutal wage and benefit concessions on auto workers as a condition for any further government loans to General Motors and Chrysler. I'm sorry, did I miss something? Does anybody recall wage cuts to bankers or executives? No, I don't remember that either. Strange how bankers who, I don't know if anybody's noticed, don't produce anything. Just get a blank check. Here's all the money you want. People who actually produce things, like the cars that we all drive, they've got to make cuts because obviously they're just of no value. The French continue to be inspiring in response to mass layoffs at a Caterpillar factory in France. The workers there kidnapped executives of the plant. Don't mess with the French. I do want to say something very serious, though. A very cool thing. I mean, people might get really freaked out. Oh my gosh, you know, they're kidnapping people. None of these executives that the French workers have kidnapped have been harmed. It's not, you know, they're not crazy, but there's something to be learned from this. These people have a responsibility not only to their shareholders, what is the legal paradigm that we live in, that their only responsibility is to the shareholders. They have a responsibility to their stakeholders, and that is the community, that is the workers, that is the people that are affected by their ridiculous decisions. And the workers in France seem to get that. We have an interesting development in Belfast, Ireland, where more than 100 workers have staged a sit-in in what is essentially a parts manufacturing plant for Ford. Ford doesn't own it anymore, but Ford is the only customer of the plant and was the sole owner up to 2000. And the workers there are saying, hey, look, you have a moral responsibility. It goes back to what the French are doing. You have a moral responsibility to these people. You know, the workers have complained about being degraded and just treated callously, and they're taking action. It's very inspiring. Another thing to consider, oftentimes we forget about this, but this is a good illustration of this point, is that 95+% of what is euphemistically called trade in the global economy is internal to giant multinational corporations. That is, this plant, like for instance this plant in Belfast, Ireland, which is essentially a part and parcel of Ford Motor Company. And yet the parts that are moved from there to, say, a plant in Detroit or wherever, somehow that is euphemistically called trade. It's anything but trade, and it's very important if we're going to understand and take action to transform this economy that we begin to understand what trade really means in our global economy. The China Labor Bulletin has released a report today, Protecting Workers' Rights or Serving the Party, the way forward for China's trade unions. And it looks in depth at the ACFTU, the All China Federation of Trade Unions, the largest trade union in the world with over 150 million members, and over the last 2 decades, and asks some pretty important questions and raises some concerns about whether or not the ACFTU is looking after the interests of the Chinese worker. The inspiring part of this is that even when the ACFTU isn't backing the worker and is instead doing its bidding for its political masters in China, the Chinese workers are organizing, they're banding together, and they are fighting. They are organizing, educating, and agitating in the old, true sense of the labor movement. and so they continue to inspire. Today marks the anniversary of Cesar Chavez's birthday. He was born in 1927 and would grow up to be one of the country's most influential and important labor activists. He was the co-founder of what is now known as the United Farm Workers Union, and he helped fight for and win numerous campaigns for the migrant workers. A lot of talk in recent weeks and months about the New Deal and its impact. A new book has just been released, The Woman Behind the New Deal, The Life of Frances Perkins, FDR's Secretary of Labor and His Moral Conscience, by Kristen Downey. Frances Perkins was probably one of the most influential cabinet members of FDR. She was instrumental in pushing forward what we think of as the New Deal: Social Security, workers' compensation, disability, all of these things. One of the things that she really was striving for was a national health care plan. And we'll play an excerpt from Democracy Now! You could hear Kristen Downey talk a little bit about Frances Perkins.
Frances Perkins is that she was a rather reluctant cabinet secretary. She was very worried about what her life would be like in Washington if she were to join FDR here. She'd been his industrial commissioner for 4 years in New York. They were already close friends. In exchange for agreeing to take the job, she gave him pretty much a list of demands of what she would insist on happening if she were to become Secretary of Labor. And they are the things that we consider the New Deal now. They're 40-hour work week, workers' compensation as a national program, unemployment compensation, Social Security, a ban on child labor, and national health insurance.
Like Joe Hill and Cesar Chavez, who fought in their own time, like our brothers and our sisters up and down that picket line, like the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long, like the union men and women standing up and standing strong, like the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long, like the union men and women standing up and standing strong. Yep.